They thought you were weak. They looked at your kindness and saw an opportunity, not a gift. They mistook your patience for permission, your generosity for naivety. They played with you, toyed with your heart, and assumed you would always stay, always give, always bend. But what they failed to realize is that kindness is not a weakness. It is a choice. And the moment you decide to withdraw that choice, the game changes. You have been here before, standing at the crossroads of pain and awakening, caught between the version of you that was too forgiving and the version that is finally learning. You told yourself that people don't mean harm, that they just don't understand your heart. You justified their actions, made excuses, and stayed longer than you should have. You convinced yourself that if you just gave a little more, loved a little harder, sacrificed a little further, they would finally see your worth. But they didn't. They only saw what they could take. They only recognized your presence when it served them. And now, you are left staring at the pieces of your own shattered trust, wondering how you let it get this far. But hear me now. This is your wake-up call. No more waiting for them to see your value. No more bending until you break. No more apologizing for having a good heart in a world that feeds off of it. You have spent too long giving love to those who never knew how to hold it. Too long being the foundation for people who never planned to build with you. Too long sacrificing your peace for the comfort of others. And for what? What did they leave you with? Regret? Emptiness? A hollow space where your self-worth used to live? No. That ends now. Think about it. How many times did you forgive what was unforgivable? How many times did you swallow your pain just to keep the peace? How many times did you let them return, knowing deep down they would only hurt you again? Ask yourself, was it worth it? Was it worth the sleepless nights, the anxious waiting, the silent suffering? You knew they were using you. You knew they were taking advantage of your kindness. And still you stayed. Still you tried. Still you gave them every chance to prove you wrong. But they didn't. And they never will. Because people like that don't change. They don't wake up one day and realize they have wronged you. No. They only realize your worth the moment they lose access to it. And that is where you stand today, at the edge of your past, staring into the power you never knew you had. This is the moment where everything shifts, where you take back every piece of yourself they tried to steal, where you reclaim the kindness they mistook for weakness and turn it into your greatest strength. So, tell me, are you ready? Ready to stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand? Ready to walk away from those who only stayed for what you could offer? Ready to see what happens when you stop being afraid of disappointing people who never hesitated to hurt you? Because this is the truth they never wanted you to know. The moment you stop giving, they start losing. And they will feel it. Every second of your absence, every moment they can no longer reach you, every time they look for you and find nothing but the silence of their own mistakes. They played with your kindness, thinking it would always be there, thinking you would always be there, but they were wrong. Because today the rules change. Today they face the consequences of what they took for granted. And you finally take back what was always yours, your strength, your dignity, your power. Now what will you do with it? You gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left, until the hands that once reached out in warmth became empty, trembling from exhaustion, until your heart, once so full of love, became a hollow space echoing with the voices of those who took but never. You poured yourself into people like water into a cracked cup, believing, hoping that one day they would learn to hold you without letting you slip through their fingers. But they never did. They never saw the effort, the sacrifices, the silent battles you fought just to keep them comfortable. And when you finally had nothing left to give, they didn't pause to ask if you were okay. They simply moved on to their next source, leaving you drained, discarded, and wondering if your kindness had ever meant anything at all. This is the burden of betrayal. Not just the act of being hurt, but the slow, quiet realization that you were never valued in the way you deserved. That the love you gave so freely was nothing more than a tool in someone else's hands. That they smiled in your face, spoke soft words laced with hidden intentions, and wrapped their needs in the disguise of friendship, love, or family. They knew you would say yes before they even asked. They knew you would always show up, always forgive, always extend a hand even when they had already let yours go. And they used that against you. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just one moment. It was a pattern, a cycle that followed you everywhere. At home, at work, in friendships, in love. Society itself told you to be kind, to be selfless, to always consider others before yourself. And yet when you did, what did you receive in return? Did kindness shield you from pain? Did it protect you from being used? No, it only made you an easier target. The world does not reward those who give endlessly. It devours them. You have felt the weight of this betrayal in the deepest parts of yourself. Lucille, understand why, whatever it is. And now, you must find your serpent. In the moments where you sat alone, questioning if you were too sensitive, too naive, too willing to believe in the good in people, you have seen the evidence in the way they treated you, how they only called when they needed something, how they vanished the moment you needed them, how they twisted your generosity into expectation, as if your love was an obligation rather than a gift. And the worst part? You let it happen, over and over again, not because you were weak, but because you believed in them more than they ever believed in you. You were the candle burning bright, bringing warmth and light to those who sat in the darkness. But while they basked in your glow, they never stopped to see the wax melting, the wick shortening, the slow destruction of the very thing that gave them comfort. They never once asked what you needed. They only took, until there was nothing left of you but the smoke of your own sacrifice. But now you see it clearly. Now you understand. They never truly appreciated your kindness. They only appreciated what they could get from it. And now that you have nothing left to give them, now that you have withdrawn your warmth, your energy, your presence, they feel it. They notice it. And that absence, that silence, that void where you used to be, it is the very thing they never expected. They thought your kindness was endless. They thought they could keep playing with your heart forever. But they were wrong, because now the game is over. There comes a moment, one defining, undeniable moment, where everything becomes clear. A moment where the weight of every betrayal, every overlooked sacrifice, every silent cry for reciprocity finally crashes down on you like a wave too strong to resist. You don't see it coming, not at first. It builds slowly, creeping into your bones, whispering in the back of your mind, tightening its grip on your chest. It's the exhaustion you can't shake, the resentment that burns at the edges of your patience, the loneliness that lingers, even in a crowded room. And then, one day it all clicks. One day you wake up and you see the truth. Not just in them, but in yourself. It wasn't love. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't loyalty. It was convenience. A transaction dressed up as affection. A game where they took and you gave, over and over, until you forgot what it felt like to be whole. You see the pattern now, how they only showed up when it benefited them, how they never poured into you the way you poured into them. You remember every time you felt guilty for asking for the bare minimum, every moment you second-guessed yourself for wanting to be treated with the same care you extended, and the realization, it knocks the breath out of you. You burn for an attention you crave, and you chase it every time you do. The worst part is that you let it happen. You excused it, justified it, convinced yourself that they didn't mean harm. You told yourself that if you just gave a little more, they would change, that they would wake up one day and finally see you the way you saw them. But that day never came, because they were never blind. They saw exactly what they had in you, and they used it until there was nothing left. You wrestle with yourself. Should you change? Should you stop being kind? Should you harden your heart, build walls so high that no one can reach you again? The thought lingers, heavy and unfamiliar. The descriptive word sacrifice feels like one broken spaghetti from the you. It feels like betrayal, like you're giving up on the part of yourself that made you different. But is it really kindness if it's costing you your peace? Is it really love if it's breaking you, piece by piece? You fear standing up for yourself. You fear what will happen when you stop being available, when you stop saying yes, when you finally put yourself first. The guilt creeps in, whispering that you're being selfish, that they'll think you've changed, that they'll turn on you the moment you set a boundary. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll call you cold. Maybe they'll act like you're the villain. But if the only way to keep them in your life is to sacrifice yourself, is it really worth it? You think about the people you held on to for too long, the ones you swore would change, the ones you defended when they didn't deserve it, the ones you fought for when they never lifted a finger for you. You think about the hope that kept you there, the belief that if you just endured a little more, they would prove you right. But hope is a dangerous thing when it blinds you to the truth. And the truth is, they were never going to change. There's a shift inside you now, something deep and irreversible. Kindness is not an obligation. It is not a debt you owe to people who refuse to give it back. It is not a bottomless well for others to drink from while you go thirsty. Your kindness is a privilege, not a right, not an expectation, and certainly not something to be played with. And the moment you understand that, everything changes. This is where you draw the line. This is where you stop waiting for them to appreciate you. This is where you stop hoping for a change that will never come. This is the moment where you finally realize that you don't have to become cold. You just have to stop giving warmth to those who refuse to stand in the fire with you. Because enough is enough. There comes a moment when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop begging to be seen, stop justifying your worth, stop waiting for the people who took you for granted to suddenly wake up and realize what they lost. This is that moment. The moment when you reclaim your power. Not by becoming someone else, not by losing your kindness, but by protecting it, by refusing to hand it over to those who only know how to destroy what they cannot truly value. They thought you would always be there, that no matter how many times they overlooked you, disrespected you, minimized your worth, you would always find a way to forgive, to stay, to keep. But they underestimated you, because what they never realized is that even the kindest souls have a breaking point. Even the softest hearts can turn into stone when they've been shattered enough times. And now, you're done. This is not about revenge. This is not about becoming cold or cruel. This is about choosing yourself. Maybe for the first time in your life, it is about learning that kindness is only true when it is given freely, not when it is expected, not when it is manipulated, not when it is drained from you until there is nothing left. You are not here to be a doormat. You are not here to be someone's emotional punching bag, their convenient source of love and support whenever they need it, but never when you do. You are not here to bleed for people who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. This is your rebirth. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes of everything they tried to burn inside you. You rise, unapologetic, unafraid, unwilling to be played with any longer. They tried to bury you in the weight of your own kindness, thinking you would never rise, thinking you would always shrink yourself for their comfort. But they forgot something. Fire does not die, it transforms. Now, you set boundaries not as an act of anger, but as an act of love for yourself. You say no without guilt. You stop making excuses for those who show you exactly who they are. You recognize the difference between real love and transactional affection, between genuine care and strategic manipulation. You stop explaining your decisions to people who never listened in the first place. You embrace the power of silence. You realize that you do not owe them an explanation, a long speech, a final goodbye. Your absence is the explanation. Your distance is the answer. And no matter how much they try to reach for you now, they will never have the same access again. Because that is the consequence of playing with a heart like yours. They took it for granted. They used it, tested it, stretched it to its limits. And now? Now they live with the reality they never thought would come. The reality where you are no longer theirs to take from. They played with your kindness, and they lost access to it forever. They never thought you'd leave. They counted on your loyalty, on your forgiving nature, on the way you always put others before yourself. They were so sure that no matter how many times they overlooked you, dismissed you, manipulated your kindness, you would always come back. You always did before, but not this time. The shift is subtle at first, a silence where your voice used to be, an absence where your presence once filled the room. They don't notice it immediately, too caught up in their own self-importance, too sure that you would never really be gone. But then reality settles in. They reach for you and find nothing. No warmth, no soft words, no reassurance. Just emptiness, and it terrifies them. This is the consequence they never saw coming, the silent punishment of being cut off. The weight of your absence suffocates them, a slow, creeping realization that they never truly valued you when they had the chance. You were their safety net, their constant source of love and energy, and now that net is gone. Love is hard and bleak and wicked by nature, but it is more terrifying than anything, the thing that holds you in the valley below. Now they feel what it's like to stand alone. Regret sets in, not because they suddenly became better people, but because they lost the convenience of having you at their beck and call. They start to remember the way you showed up for them, the way you gave without hesitation, the way you never once made them feel alone. And now, that love, that presence, that unwavering support, it's nowhere to be found. They are left with nothing but their own reflection, forced to sit with the truth they never wanted to face. They took you for granted. And this is not revenge. This is not about seeking payback. Not about proving a point, not about making them suffer. This is simply what happens when you stop playing the fool, when you finally choose yourself, when you stop feeding those who would let you starve. They fed off your light, but now they are left in darkness. And the most powerful thing about it? You didn't have to do anything but walk away. They thought they had control over you. They thought you would always be available, always waiting, always willing to overlook their selfishness. But they were wrong, because now they sit in the very emptiness they created, drowning in the consequences of their own arrogance. And you are free. Free from their games, free from their manipulation, free from the cycle that kept you bound to people who never deserved you. And in that freedom, you finally see the truth. They never deserved your kindness in the first place. Letting go isn't as simple as walking away. The body moves first, but the heart takes time to catch up. The echoes of the past don't fade overnight. Even when you know they were wrong for you, even when you've seen the truth with your own eyes, there are moments when doubt creeps in. The guilt, the nostalgia, the questions. Did I overreact? Did I give up too soon? What if they change? The mind plays its cruel tricks. making you second guess the very pain that forced you to leave in the first place. The temptation to return is strong, not because they deserve another chance, but because familiarity is seductive. Your heart still remembers the warmth before the cold, the good times before the betrayal. But that's the trick of memory. It romanticizes what was, erasing the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the weight of never feeling enough, the exhaustion of always giving and never receiving. That nostalgia is a lie, and deep down you know it. So how do you let go? How do you detach without regret? You start by understanding this. You do not owe them your presence. You do not owe them a conversation, an explanation, a chance to plead their case. And you can forgive them and still never speak to them again. You can love them and still refuse to be disrespected. You can remember the good times and still choose yourself. Detachment isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's the decision to stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And closure, you don't need it. Not in the way you think. Because closure isn't a final conversation. It isn't an apology you'll never get. It isn't them suddenly realizing your worth and begging to make things right. No, closure is the moment you decide that their actions are enough of an answer. That their silence, their betrayal, their inability to love you correctly was the closure you needed all along. Silence is the best answer to those who never deserved your words. They will look for you in places they used to find you. They will reach for the version of you that no longer exists, and they will come up empty. Because you are no longer there. You have nothing left to give them. And that is the truest closure of all. Walking away isn't losing. It's winning with dignity. It's standing in your power, knowing that some battles aren't meant to be fought. They are meant to be left behind. And when you finally step into that truth, you'll realize you never needed them. You only needed yourself. Kindness is not weakness. It never was, but the world made you believe otherwise. They saw your open heart and mistook it for an open door, one they could walk through whenever they pleased, without knocking, without gratitude, without care. They mistook your patience for passivity, your forgiveness for foolishness. But now you see the truth. Kindness was never the problem. The problem was giving it to those who never deserved it. This is where you redefine kindness, not as a blind, endless offering, but as something sacred, something that requires discernment, boundaries, and protection. You can be kind and still say no. You can be compassionate without being consumed. Because real kindness is not about sacrificing yourself. It's about choosing who is worthy of the love you give so freely. Not everyone deserves your kindness, and that is not a cruel truth. It is a necessary one. Selective kindness is not selfishness, it is wisdom. You do not water dead plants. You do not build homes in places where you are not welcome. You do not hand over your heart to those who have already proven they will break it. Instead, you give your kindness to those who cherish it. You protect it from those who would exploit it. You offer it with intention, not obligation. A sword stays sharp not because it is constantly used for war, but because it is respected. And that is the lesson they will learn, that your kindness was never theirs to abuse, that your love was never a weakness, but a strength they foolishly took for granted, that they will never play with your kindness again, because you finally understand its value. And now you move forward, not bitter, not hardened, but wiser, stronger, unshakable. They may regret losing you, they may feel the weight of your absence, but that is no longer your burden to carry. You owe them nothing. And for the first time, you understand that the only person who truly needed your kindness was you. Now that you see the truth, now that you understand your worth, the question is, what will you do with this new strength? Will you protect your energy, or will you let them drain you again? Will you uphold your boundaries, or will you let guilt pull you back into the same cycle? Will you move forward as the unshakable force you have become, or will you allow the past to drag you back into submission? The choice is yours, and it always has been. Look at the journey you have taken. You started in pieces, unsure of your worth, believing that love required sacrifice, that kindness meant enduring mistreatment. You gave and gave until you were left empty, waiting for people to return what they never intended to. You endured the weight of betrayal, the pain of realization, the heartbreak of detachment. Was that success? No. Not after all you've gone through. I needed many things. It sounds ridiculous with all you, but through it all you found something far greater than the approval of others. You found yourself. You did not break. You transformed. You did not lose. You learned. And now you stand at the threshold of a new chapter, no longer a victim, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. You are the architect of your own life, and no one will ever play with your kindness again. They thought they had power over you. They thought they could manipulate you, control you, use you at their convenience, but they never realized the strength that was waiting beneath your softness, the fire that was buried under your patience, and now they will never have access to it again. because you were always powerful. You just had to remember it. So go forward, not with anger, but with certainty. Not with resentment, but with wisdom. The past is behind you. The old version of you, the one who allowed themselves to be taken for granted, is gone. And in their place stands someone unstoppable, someone who gives with purpose, loves with discernment, and walks away when necessary. Someone who knows that kindness is a choice, not an obligation. Someone who will never be played again. This is your time.